Welcome back to our study called An Outrageous Thing. We're looking at Genesis chapter 34. It's an outrageous chapter. And today we're looking at verses 1 through 6. And one of the striking things here in this little section is Jacob's inaction. Now in verse 1 we find Dinah, who we haven't talked about for some time now. We saw her birth mentioned back in chapter 30, 4 chapters before us. 30 verse 21. She is a child of Leah and was born after all the 6 sons that Leah had with Jacob. So she is the 7th born of Leah. Now she was only a small child when they left Haran, and some time has passed since then, and some time has passed since the meeting of Esau and our story that we're looking at now. There's clearly a passage of time. This is not a little child that's going out. This is a young woman now. So, though the text does not specifically tell us how old Dinah is, we can deduce from what's going on and the timeline in Jacob's life that she's probably a young teenager now. Moses simply states that she went out to see the women of the land. Now, apparently Dinah leaves the tent city of her father, Jacob. She leaves that security, she leaves her home and heads towards the city of Shechem. And she's doing so unaccompanied. And she goes off into the city. Now, even from ancient times, a young woman never ventured out alone in public. It just wasn't something that a young woman would do. Now, a woman who was out by herself meant that she was looking for something, and was not a proper thing for a woman to do. She's looking for trouble. That's what she was doing. It also left a young woman vulnerable to many dangers, including young men. This is how it was. You're just leaving yourself exposed. So there's a warning here. It's definitely a warning. There's no excuse for what is about to happen in the story. What Shechem does is an evil thing. Yes. And our hearts should break. My heart breaks for young women who are abused in this way or assaulted. I mean, it's ridiculous. It shouldn't happen. It is an outrageous thing that happens to Dinah. That is true. But she puts herself in that place. Now, not every woman, we know not every woman does that. It's not a woman's fault. But sometimes women do put themselves in bad places when they shouldn't be doing, and are inviting it. And that's what she was doing by going against this cultural norm, that you just didn't do that. You don't go out unless you are looking for this to happen to you. You're looking for a man, and usually it was women who were involved in prostitution would be out there alone. So this is the situation that Dinah finds herself in. She wasn't out there purely, she wasn't pure in this whole thing. So that's what that means there. So, if she would have, all this happened because of her actions. If she would have stayed home, she wouldn't have gotten into this situation. If she would have taken someone else with her, she wouldn't have gotten in that situation. If she would have gone with her brothers or her father or someone else, I'm sure they were going back and forth between the city and having commerce between them. And but she doesn't do that. She doesn't take anyone with her. She goes out by herself. She would have been safe, at least safer, if she would have brought someone with her. But she chooses to go out there on her own. So as Dinah is in the city, she caught the attention of Shechem. Now Shechem was the son of the local ruler, Hamor, and the city was named after Shechem. So Shechem is like a prince, basically, and Hamor would be the king of the city, or the ruler. He's like the mayor of the city, and then Shechem would be his son. But the city's named after him as well. So Shechem has power, yes, prestige, obviously, since the city is named after him. They have some wealth, and this is often a recipe for disaster in any situation, including the Bible. The Bible tells us that Shechem seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. Verse 5 says that he defiled her. So it's clear that this act was against her will. She was not desiring of this happening. He humiliates her. He defiles her. He didn't woo her and get her to do something that she wanted to do. But he does it against her will. It's an act he forces himself upon her. But after Shechem did this, his soul was drawn to Dinah, and he began to love her and speak tenderly to her, it says. And he kept her in his house, which is really bizarre. But that's what they did. And so Shechem goes to his father and asks him to help her set up a marriage contract with Jacob, so that he might have Dinah as his wife. He wants to marry her now. At this time in history, and even in some parts of the world today, I mean, this would still be a legitimate way to conduct yourself. In some parts of the world, even today, it's not entirely seen as wrong to go and force a man to force himself on a woman and then go to her parents and then ask for marriage. Still happens. So it's not outside the realm of, we as in the Western world, in our culture, we see that as kind of repulsive, as wrong, as evil. And clearly Israel and his sons thought it was wrong. But that's what the culture did, and the culture still does that. But we know from the Bible, we know from the story that it's wrong. You shouldn't do that. We know from the God's law that that's wrong. It shouldn't happen. Now, let's move on to the next part, where a word of what happened to Dinah finally made it to Jacob somehow. I don't know, it doesn't say how Jacob found out about what was going on, but he does. But we're told that since his sons were out in the field, so they were taking care of the animals, he didn't say anything. It says he kept his peace until they came. Now, his inactivity is quite surprising. He could have gone to town and said, hey, what's going on? If Jacob's sons were there when the news hit, would he have done something? I wonder. It kind of applies here that he would have said something, he would have done something if his sons were there, but since they weren't, then he holds his peace because his sons weren't there. So who knows what he would have done, but anyway, I mean, he could have gone out and gotten his sons, right, and said, hey, I just found out that your sister is in town and this man has taken her, so, but he doesn't do that, so who knows what he would have done, I don't know, but apparently he would have done something, but here we just have the inactivity of Jacob. He doesn't do anything. Of course, we'll never know what Jacob might have done because here he virtually does nothing when he hears that Dinah is in the house of another man. But not too long after, something will have to be done. As in verse 6, Hamor goes out to speak with Jacob about the marriage proposal. So Jacob was trying to ignore the situation, I guess, until his sons came back. But hey, Hamor's coming out. And something's got to be done. So, come back next time and we'll look at the next section and we'll continue on in this very interesting, very kind of disturbing story as well.